Hello everyone and welcome back. It is time to do my October reading wrap up, and I'm going to be referring to my notes a lot because in October I read 13 books. And a surprising number were rereads actually, just looking at it. I reread a lot in October as well. So yeah, I'm just going to dive into this because I've got a feeling this is going to take a little while to get through because I can't remember the last time I read this many books. Even accounting for the SBFBO books I don't show in my wrap-ups, this was a lot of books. This was a tall stack to try and take the photo. So the first book I read in October was a reread, and this was Space Opera by Catherynne M. Valente. The universe is teeming with life. Life that tried to wipe each other out during the Sentience Wars. Wars that were fought to answer the question, who is sentient and who is not? As a solution, the Metagalactic Grand Prix is born, a contest where newly discovered species sing for their very existence. And as the newcomers on the block, this year it's Earth's turn. I loved this just as much the second time around, and this is one of my favourite books, and it gets such low ratings on Goodreads, and I don't know why. It is so much fun. It's just silly and over the top, and yet there's this absolutely planet-destroying threat in the background. It's all just so bizarre. At the heart of it, it is a washed-up band coming back together for one last gig, although there is a hint of desperation about this. There is humour as well, and I really enjoyed all the bits about the aliens and how they handled entering the competition. It did feel a touch info-dumpy at times when we met a new alien race, but still, I loved this and I gave it 5 out of 5 once again. The second book I read was Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher. After years of seeing her sister suffer at the hands of an abusive prince, Mara, the shy convent-raised third-born daughter, realises that no one is coming to their rescue. No one except for Mara herself. On her quest, Mara is joined by a grave witch, a reluctant fairy godmother, a strapping former knight, and a chicken possessed by a demon. Together, the 5 of them intend to rescue Mara's family and save the realm from its tyrannical ruler at last. This is so beautifully written. It's fairy tale-esque, and there is so much packed into just over 300 pages. There is a lot of backwards and forwards throughout. We jump around in the timelines, but it shows us how we get to those really quite eerie scenes at the start. I loved watching Mara develop throughout, plus all the characters who joined her. And honestly, I'm just more and more impressed with each T. Kingfisher book I read, and I gave this one a 5 out of 5. The next book I read was Sins of the Mother by Rob J. Hayes, and this is the 4th book in the War Eternal series. So I shan't go too much into this one, but we do meet a slightly older Eskara in this one, and just when you think things can't get any more, remember you are reading Eskara's story. I really enjoyed this one, and I am definitely waiting for the last part, which is coming out towards the end of the year, because oh my god, that ending. I gave this one a 4 out of 5. And then another one which actually ended up being a reread. I think I read this on my Kindle first, but one of my subscribers sent me a physical copy, and this is All Systems Red by Martha Wells. In a corporate-dominated spacefaring future, all missions must be supplied by the company, and exploratory missions accompanied by a security unit android for their own safety. One then is supplied by the lowest bidder. One survey team is watched over by their android, a self-aware security unit who has hacked its own governor unit and calls itself Murderbots when no one else is around. But when a neighbouring mission goes quiet, it's up to this team of scientists and their Murderbots to get to the truth of what has happened. So yeah, Goodreads told me I read this in 2018, and it was definitely time for a reread because I want to move on and read the rest of the series. This is so absorbing, and I loved following Murderbot. Not wanting to become human, but still not quite sure who they are. I did enjoy their perspective while helping to solve the mystery, added an interesting dynamic to things, but I think for this little novella there were a few too many characters. I felt that none of them, except for Murderbot, really stood out, but this could also be Murderbot's general disinterest in individual humans. So yeah, I gave this 4 out of 5, and I definitely want to continue the series. The next was another reread, and this is Abaddon's Gate by James S.A. Corey, which is the third in the Expanse series, and it's looking less and less likely that I'm going to complete my reread of the first 8 books of the Expanse this year. This one is a lot slower than we've had in the past, and the focus tends to be mainly on the crew's interactions and reactions to events. There was a little less time with the crew of the Rocinante this time, but there was a lot of people to meet and get through. I gave this one 4 out of 5. I still really enjoyed it. It's just not my favourite of the series. The next book I read then was 10,000 Stitches by Olivia Atwater, and I think I read Half a Soul in September. That does sound about right. That was quite a few books ago. Effie has inconveniently fallen in love with Mr. Benedict Ashbrook. There is only one problem. Effie is a housemaid, and a housemaid cannot marry a gentleman. It seems Effie is out of luck until she stumbles into the fairy realm and Lord Blackthorn, who's only too delighted to interfere with humanity and try and help Effie win Mr. Ashbrook's heart. All he asks in return is that she sews 10,000 stitches into his favourite jacket. My least favourite out of the trilogy, although I did enjoy it more as we moved into the second half. Once again, some wonderful descriptions going from the opulence of the balls to the treatment of the household staff. I did really enjoy how the magic was explored in this one. Although we generally follow new characters, there are some crossovers with characters we have met before. But the main focus is generally this new household. So I gave this one 3 out of 5. And that was closely followed by Long Shadow, which is the third book in the trilogy. Young ladies of a marriageable age are dying in their sleep in London, and Abigail Wilder is determined to find out why. Thankfully, Abigail is not the only one investigating these terrible events in London. Mercy, a street rat and self-taught magician, insists on accompanying Abigail to investigate what is going on. But while Mercy's magic is strange and foreboding, she may pose an even greater danger to Abigail's own heart. This was darker and less romance-focused than the other 2 books, although the fairies haven't exactly been light-hearted through the rest of the series. Beautifully written as always, and I really appreciate how immersive they have all been. Once again, more opulent balls and badly behaved ladies. I gave this one 4 out of 5. The next book was kind of in a similar vein. This is Turning Darkness into Light by Marie Brennan, and this takes place after the main Lady Trent series. As the renowned granddaughter of Lady Trent, Audrey Camhurst has always known that she wanted to make her own mark. When Lord Glynley recruits Audrey to decipher a series of tablets containing the secrets of ancient draconian society, she has no idea that she is being drawn into a conspiracy, one that is there to incite war. This takes place obviously sometime after the original series and does a really good job of recapturing that magic. Audrey is an interesting character, and Marie Brennan has managed to not fall into the trap of just basically making a newer version of Lady Trent. She has her own distinct voice, and while she has to deal with the same sexism that Lady Trent does, there's also the added racism that Audrey has to deal with in this society. The main plot is told through Audrey's diary, although we have letters and translations and articles as well. I really enjoyed seeing how all of this came together, a really nice addition to the series, and I gave this 4 out of 5. Then I read The Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel, and this was my birthday present from Zara this year. In 1912, 18-year-old Edwin St. Andrew crosses the Atlantic. In British Columbia, he enters the forest, spellbound by the beauty of the Canadian wilderness. For a split second, all is darkness, the sound of a violin echoing unnaturally through the air. The experience shocks him to his core. 2 centuries later, Olive Llewellyn, a famous writer, is going on a book tour away from her home on the second moon colony. Within her book is a strange passage. A man plays a violin for change in the echoing corridor of an airship terminal, as trees rise around him. A beautiful nested narrative that just works and comes together in the most wonderful way. I loved trying to see how all of this came together, and for such a short book, it's not too long, there is an impressive amount of character, plot and world building crammed in. Each of the sections feels fully realised as if it's its own story, and I still can't believe this is only the second Emily St. John Mandel I've read. I gave it 4 out of 5 this time around, but I've got a feeling it's going to be a 5 out of 5 on a reread. Then I read The Wolf of Orenyaro by K.S. Villoso. Born under the crumbling towers of her kingdom, Queen Talion was the shining jewel in the War of the Wolves. It nearly tore her nation apart, but her arranged marriage to the prince of a rival clan heralded peace. He suddenly disappears before the reign can begin, and the nation is fractured beyond repair. Years later, he sends a mysterious message, asking to meet. I've got to admit I was a touch disappointed. So The Wolf of Orenyaro is book 1 of the Chronicles of the Bitch Queen. We are told repeatedly how fearsome Queen Talion is, but I found her to be somewhat naive and inexperienced. She has always been surrounded by guards and staff and finds herself a little bit lost without them. But I enjoyed watching her learn about the world and settle into a more confident self. It's an interesting world, and I've got to admit I loved the descriptions of food. I have such a weakness for great food in fantasy. I'm definitely intrigued and I plan to continue on, but I only gave this one a 3 out of 5. And we're still going. There's still more books on this pile that I have read this month. This is why I don't read so many books in a month. It takes so long to do the wrap-up. Anyway, I read Cibola Burn by James S.A. Corey, and this is the 4th Expanse book. We explore new ground, but we still have that age-old story of belters versus inners. Holden has to go in and fix things again. We have a really great set of point of view characters here. Some familiar names, but we're seeing things from their point of view for the first time. There's a bit more going on, and there's not nearly enough Avasarala, but there is enough to produce one of science fiction's greatest lines. Don't stick your dick in it. It's fucked enough already. Anyway, I gave this one 4 out of 5 on a reread. I managed to cram in a couple more before the end of the month, a couple more seasonal reads. So What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher came out recently, and it's only a novella, so I did manage to fit this one in. When Alex Easton, a retired soldier, receives a letter saying that their childhood friend Madeline is dying, they rush to the ancestral home of the Ushers in countryside of Ruritania. What they find is a nightmare of fungal growth and a dark, pulsing lake. Aided by a British mycologist, a baffled American doctor, Alex must discover the truth of what is happening before the House of Usher consumes them all. This is a retelling of Edgar Allan Poe's short story, The Fall of the House of Usher, and I think it did a really good job of capturing that creepy gothic vibe, but expanding on the story somewhat. There is a wonderful creeping sense of dread throughout, although I did feel things came together a little bit too quickly and conveniently in places. But it's beautifully written and atmospheric and perfect for the end of October. I gave this one 4 out of 5. And speaking of perfect Halloween reads, I managed to cram in Pet Sematary by Stephen King. Dr. Lewis Creed is uneasy as he drives his family to their new home in Ludlow, New England. They meet Judd Crandall, their neighbour, who takes them exploring and shows them the Pet Sematary, the place where local children for generations have buried their family pets. The family have barely settled in when the nightmare begins. A dying student warns Lewis Creed about the grounds beyond the Pet Sematary. Death visits again, bringing tragedy to the Creed family, and Lewis sets off on a terrifying journey beyond the realms of human comprehension and sanity. This is one of the creepiest books Stephen King has written, and I think he's said in the past that this is the one that scares him, given some of the subject matter in this book. It does really go to some dark places and has some of the tensest, creepiest scenes that I have come across in pretty much anything. After 3 rereads, this is still the perfect read for Halloween, and just as an offset, I want to point out, I don't think I mentioned before, this contains some really touching scenes of male friendship. Anyway, I gave it 4 out of 5 again, because that seems to be what I'm doing this month. So that was my wrap-up That's taken a long time to get through, and I've got to edit this together. So I would love to know what you have read this month, and I shall see you all soon.